You know that feeling when you try to do the right thing, but somehow everything just goes wrong? That's exactly how I ended up here, sitting on this cold balcony, watching the New Year lights flicker and wishing I could undo the past few weeks. It was my first New Year with my new husband, Chief Dre. We had flown down to his family home in Calabar, a big fancy place with white walls and a garden that smelled of fresh hibiscus. Everything was perfect, the decorations, the food, and the way Chief introduced me to everyone as my queen. I wanted to impress his family, especially William, his 28-year-old son from his first marriage. William was quiet, the kind of man that could sit in a room full of noise and still be in his own world. I wasn't sure he liked me. He barely said more than a few words the whole day. But that night, as the harmattan breeze chilled the air and everyone gathered in the living room, someone suggested we play a game of truth or dare. I wasn't a fan of these childish games, but I thought, why not? It's just harmless fun. William sat directly across from me, his eyes catching the glow of the New Year tree lights. When it was his turn, he chose truth. Someone asked him, "What's one thing you've never told anyone in this family?" He paused for a moment, then said, "I've always felt like an outsider here." His voice was calm, but I could feel the weight of his words. Everyone laughed it off, saying he was being dramatic, but I didn't. I understood what it felt like to want to belong. After the game, I found him outside on the veranda, staring at the stars. "Hey," I said softly, wrapping my shawl tighter around me. "About what you said earlier." He turned to me, surprised. "You don't have to feel sorry for me." "I'm not." I get it," I replied, leaning on the railing beside him. "It's not easy being the new person." He smiled just a little. "You're different, dude. Everyone loves you." "Maybe, but that doesn't mean I don't feel alone sometimes." That was the first real conversation we had. It was innocent, just two people connected. But looking back now, I wonder if that moment was where everything began to change, because after that night, William started opening up to me. We'd sit up late talking about everything, his childhood, his dreams, his fears, and somehow, in the middle of it all, I stopped seeing him as just Chief's son. The nights in Calabar had a kind of magic to them, the cool harmattan wind, the distant sound of drums from a nearby festival, and the way the stars seemed to dance in the sky. It became our thing, William and me, to sit outside on the veranda after everyone else had gone to bed. At first, it was harmless. We talked about random things, his favorite books, how he hated banking but felt stuck in the family tradition, and the time he got lost at OPA as a kid and his dad didn't even notice. "You know," I said one night, sipping on a warm cup of Zobo, "I think you're too hard on Chief. He cares about you, he just has a funny way of showing it." William laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "Judith, you don't know him the way I do. With my dad, it's always about control. If it's not his way, it's no way." I didn't argue. I'd seen that side of Chief too, but I'd also seen the softer side, the one that made me fall for him. "Still, you're lucky to have him," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "Lucky?" He raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a small mischievous smile. "Is that why you married him? Because he's so lucky to have you?" I froze for a second. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," he said quickly, looking away. But the way he said it stayed with me. The next day was New Year, and the house was alive with activity. Aunties were in the kitchen shouting about too much salt in the goat meat, the uncles were outside, already halfway through a bottle of Ogagoro before noon, and the kids were running around in their matching Ankara outfits, spilling chin-chin everywhere. I kept busy arranging gifts under the tree and helping serve food, but every time I glanced at William, I felt this strange tension, like there was something unspoken between us. Later in the afternoon, after the big family lunch, he caught me alone in the kitchen. "You've been avoiding me," he said, leaning against the counter with that same mischievous smile. "I've been busy," I replied, not looking up from the tray of jollof rice I was arranging. "Judith," he said softly, stepping closer. "You don't have to keep pretending." "Pretending what?" I asked, finally meeting his eyes. That there's nothing here, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart skipped. I should have shut it down right there, told him to stop. But instead, I stood frozen, my hands gripping the tray like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. William, this is wrong, I managed to say. Then why can't you look away? He asked, his voice calm, almost daring. I had no answer. That evening, after the family had finished playing games and drinking palm wine, someone put on music. Let's dance, one of the aunties shouted, pulling Chief to his feet. The whole living room turned into a small party, with everyone dancing to old highlife songs. Even I couldn't resist. Chief twirled me around, his laughter booming as he tried to match my steps. But then I caught William's gaze. Judith, he asked Chief, holding out his hand. Chief laughed, this all yours. I felt my chest tighten as William pulled me close, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. It was innocent enough, at least on the surface, but the way he looked at me, the way his fingers lingered just a second too long, made my heart race. You're playing with fire, I whispered, my smile forced. And you're not stopping me, he whispered back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying every moment in my head, the dance, his words, the way I didn't stop him. Around midnight, I got up to get some water. As I stepped into the kitchen, there he was, leaning against the fridge with a glass in his hand. Couldn't sleep either, he asked, his voice low. I nodded, suddenly aware of how small the space felt with just the two of us. He took a step closer, then another. Judith, William, don't, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. And then, before I could think, he kissed me. For a moment, I let it happen. My mind screamed at me to push him away, to run, but my body didn't listen. When I finally pulled back, I felt a wave of guilt so strong it nearly knocked me over. This can't happen again, I whispered, my voice shaking. But deep down, I wasn't sure if I believed it. After that night, nothing was the same. William and I tried to act normal, but the tension was like a shadow that followed us everywhere. I avoided him during the day, throwing myself into helping the family prepare for Boxing Day celebrations, but at night, when the house was quiet, I'd replay everything in my mind, the kiss, the way my heart betrayed me, and the crushing guilt that came after. William didn't make things easier. He'd catch my eye during family meals, his gaze lingering just a little too long. Once, when we crossed paths in the hallway, he whispered, "We need to talk." "No, we don't," I snapped, walking away before he could say more. But I couldn't walk away from my own conscience. Every time I looked at Chief, my stomach churned. He was so proud to show me off, introducing me to his friends, bragging about how lucky he was to have me. And there I was, carrying a secret that could shatter everything. The final stroke came on the evening of Boxing Day. The family had planned a barbecue in the garden, and Chief asked me to help him set up the grill. William was there, of course, helping to carry charcoal and cracking jokes with the uncles. At one point, I went inside to grab a tray of meat, and William followed me. "Judith, we can't keep pretending," he said, blocking my way. "Move," I said, trying to push past him, but he didn't budge. "Why are you fighting this?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "You feel it too, I know you do." I stared at him, my heart racing. "William, this isn't about what I feel, this is about what's right, and this isn't right." He looked at me for a long moment, then stepped aside. "If that's how you feel, I'll stop," he said quietly. "But don't lie to yourself, Judith. You're as stuck as I am." That night, I stayed up long after everyone else had gone to bed. I sat on the veranda, staring at the moon and thinking about the mess I had created. William was right, I was stuck, not just in this situation, but in my own mind. Somewhere along the line, I had let loneliness and the need for validation cloud my judgment. I thought about Chief, about the vows I had made, and about the kind of woman I wanted to be. And then I made a decision. The next morning, I asked Chief if we could leave Calabar early. "I just feel like we need some time alone," I said, forcing a smile. He agreed without hesitation, and by that evening, we were on a flight back to Lagos. As we drove home from the airport, I felt a sense of relief. I didn't know how I was going to fix things, but I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't let this mistake define me. As I sit here sharing this story, I want every woman to know this: life will test you. It will put you in situations that challenge your values, your strength, and your loyalty. But in those moments, you have to remember who you are and what you stand for. It's okay to feel lonely, it's okay to crave attention. But don't let those feelings lead you into decisions that will haunt you. Protect your peace, your heart, and your dignity. And most importantly, if you find yourself on the edge of making a choice you regret, step back. Because some lines, once crossed, are impossible to uncross.